Capture cards do not encode video for you when you're live streaming, but should they? The answer is no, but I want to kind of dive into this here based on this comment from Akine, I think the username is. I'm trying to do more videos on this side channel responding to topics that I can't just, casually do a lazy video on the main channel for. This is something I've talked about in a multitude of videos, but I will never not leap at the opportunity to talk about it again and frame it and try to get it in more people, so in the faces of more people. So specifically, they're saying I thought capture cards could also record videos, but apparently that is not the case. I have an old capture card over 20 years ago, and it also did recording. I don't see the point of these devices other than being able to capture from a PlayStation or similar. Yes, that is the entire point of capture cards, to capture external sources. They're not marketed for, they are not designed for capturing single PC setups, and they do not benefit it. The capture cards they are referring to, I could go grab some, but it would interrupt the video. I have quite a few old ones. They recorded in like MPEG 2, recording your TV signals, things like that. And yeah, they encoded on board, but they weren't designed for video games. It was analog video, so like it was way easier to do than all of the different formats and specs and things like that these days. Things change over time, but specifically the means by which you actually record video has also improved drastically over the past 20 years. In that the hardware, the computers you were putting those capture cards in, and even back in the early 2010s when like the Digital Foundry people were making the first HD capture PCs, the computer hardware, the processor and graphics card and stuff that you were pairing with these capture cards to capture the footage was completely not up to spec for that kind of recording work. And so you needed these kinds of weird capture cards to do that encoding work for you. That is no longer the case with modern technology, higher end systems. Hardware accelerated video encoding is the future. It is the standard these days. And there is no add-in device that can really supplant that in a way that would be beneficial. Like you have, so to be clear, there are capture cards that can encode the video on the card. But in all of my testing, and I've even seen some in Lon Seidman's testing with laptops and stuff, this doesn't benefit you unless you are recording in an external device. So you have your standard capture card, USB 3 or PCIe, which is designed to give you the lowest latency and most uncompressed signal possible to then add into OBS, and we're going to talk about why that matters, or another recording software, and record or stream it from there. That's fine. But then you have either older or weird ones like the Live Gamer Mini USB 2.0 capture cards, or capture cards designed specifically to record within the device itself. So you have capture cards like the Elgato HD60S Plus, which records to an SD card. You've got the AverMedia Live Gamer portable devices I've recorded to. You've got the Cloner Alliance capture cards. I have a whole video coming on dedicated, like, no PC recording setups with those. Most of them, except for the Elgato, because it is the bougie version that does HEVC encoding and stuff, most of them record very low quality. It is because the encoder chips that they have to do to make it affordable enough and low power enough to run off USB power and encode HD video in here are recording the fastest possible preset they could get off of a dedicated little encoder chip of H.264 at a very low bit rate to a micro SD card to just be universally, functional. It'll work. It ain't great looking. Neither was MPEG 2 back in the day. You just were recording a lower resolution, and that was the norm. But honestly, even, compare that to what you can capture of standard definition today. Those capture cards back in the day did not record very high quality video either. And then of course there are the higher tier field recorder monitors from the likes of Atomos. Blackmagic has some. Convergent Design has a few. And these record completely uncompressed to ProRes or DNxHR or even ProRes RAW or Blackmagic RAW in some cases. Although Atomos did just release a new version of their Ninja V that records in HEVC. I wanted to get my hands on it, but after I called them out for cloning a $10 capture card and selling it for $80, they are no longer sending me things, of course. But those are, $500 to $1,000, and especially with the ProRes, you need the storage space for it. I explained all this in the comment. I'm just explaining to you, the viewer. This isn't a dedicated reply to this person. I'm trying to increase the broad awareness. But then they replied one final time before I wanted to make this video instead of trying to keep it going in text. The reason why I looked into capture cards was that I thought I could maybe buy a card cheaper, then I could buy a new GPU. I'm still in a GTX 750. Ugh. But it runs great with the games I play, City Skylines, Surviving Mars. I mean, if so, that's awesome. Can record downsampled video in decent quality via OBS, but I have to lower the games to a low setting. But if I capture, yeah, because your 750 really doesn't have a super useful GPU encoder there. I'd question what CPU you have. You might have QuickSync available if you have a Intel chip. That would be really usable. Well, a day wasted looking into capture cards until I realized I can't actually record anything like the old days. So again, there are options. You're just gonna, like, this kind of functionality does exist, as I explained. It just sacrifices something, and it will always sacrifice something. So getting to their end of their point here, I understand your points and then not. I'm actually surprised OBS doesn't support hardware encoding other than via CPU or GPU, and that the market is as limited. I was looking at the A10 Mini for a long time, but it's more or less just as expensive as a new GPU, and I'm not even sure it's a good match for game recording. The problem is not in the encoding. I mean, yes, when a capture card is going to cost you as much as getting a GPU that can do it for you and run your games better, you should 100% get a GPU. That's always going to be the better option. For a dedicated single PC, solution, you should, especially with the 750 Ti, you should 100% be up spending your money on an upgrade rather than a capture card. I would never have suggested otherwise, even if there was an option. The problem is not in the encoding, because theoretically, OBS could support one of those encoders. And in fact, I think there was a weird plugin at some point. I don't think it exists anymore, but at one point, OBS, or XSplit maybe, could encode your stream to the LiveGamer HT2's encoder. The problem is it was a bad time because the encoder is not great quality compared to anything else and the latency involved. So OBS is not a recording program. It is a compositing, scene rendering, streaming program. So it doesn't just take a video feed and encode it. That's what the likes of Virtual Dub, Amarek, GUVC View on Linux. There's another one. Virtual Dub's kind of the big one on Windows that most people use. Those programs are designed to do zero with your actual computer and just take your capture card feed and dump it to disk. And so capture cards like the LiveGamer Mini, the Elgato 4K 60S Plus, the Cloner Alliance ones, it will take those already compressed H.264 or MPEG 2, no, not MPEG 2, MJPEG, that's what I'm thinking of, streams, and allow you to just dump it to disk or use, one of those lossless AVI encoders, which is going to take up way more space, and just dump it straight to disk. That's what those programs are for. OBS is not meant to function like that, and deleting half the settings in some weird alternate mode to support that would not really benefit anyone when those other tools exist. You got to choose the right tool for the right job. OBS is designed to layer multiple scenes and sources together, which require, and the ability to allow you to downscale it all, requires scene rendering, which uses up your graphics card, in the 3D load, much how Photoshop would or a video editor would. That is using your 3D components of your graphics card to composite and build a scene just like editing a photo or a video. Put those together, generate that frame, and then encode that frame. So the way it is optimized today is it takes your game and any other sources that might get decoded by your GPU, and otherwise those sources have to be bounced through your system RAM, your CPU, back to the graphics card, composite them all on your graphics card, and then ideally, since it is what everyone's using pretty much at this point, it will continue encoding it on your graphics card without having to leave your graphics card again, which is the most high performant and highest quality route you can take at this point. That's just how it works. Keeping everything on one card is the way to go. When you try to introduce a capture card for that, you're taking the textures of your game, which are rendering on your graphics card, you're bouncing them out across system RAM, across your CPU, back down to the capture card. Well, I guess, okay, if you're outputting it straight from your graphics card to the capture card, you're taking the textures rendering on your graphics card, outputting through HDMI into the capture card. The capture card is compressing it on stream, or on the card, which is automatically hurting your quality, adding a bunch more latency. And then if you're trying to use OBS or another program like that to do anything else with it, then it is, again, passing that back across RAM, across your CPU to decode that already compressed feed, decompress it as best as it can. It's not going to regain all that quality, but it has to decode that format it just compressed it to, spend all that time doing all that work, then add it back to your GPU in the OBS scene, stack whatever else on top or just scale it or whatever, and then encode it again. Because OBS can't, the capture cards don't function that way, and they never have. Capture cards cannot contain the hardware to composite and render and I've had a bunch of comments like this recently, and that's part of the reason I want to make this video. People are like, oh, why can't you just make a capture card that also has the ability to composite and render your scene? Because that, by definition, by functionality, would be a GPU. And at that point, why would they make such a niche targeted product that would take away so much and cost so much when you would just buy a GPU? And again, if you already have a GPU of like 900 series or better, You're not gaining anything from this. It's just you're paying money for a solution you don't need. I hope this makes things make more sense at all. I wanted to word it and try to illustrate it a bit here rather than snarky text comments, because I feel like I don't know. Like I said, I get comments like this all the time recently, and I just wanted to add my take here.